my special guest today is Anouk Wipprecht, and she's from Holland. There she is. And if you're seeing this later on YouTube, don't forget to please subscribe and share and like, because the more we get these people out there, the better. I'm Mike with Thinking with Mike, and the whole theme of my show is to interview interesting people talking about interesting things. And Anouk has kind of cornered the market on those two things because she's an interesting person and she does really interesting things. And Anouk, why don't you do me a favor now? Could you please tell the audience who you are and what you're all about?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm a Dutch fashion tech designer, which means that I combine electronics with sensors, robotics, anything on the body. And what I'm trying to figure out is if and when we place technology on the body, what does it do other than just blinking and bleeping? How can it create an interesting dialogue between you and yourself, your body, or you and your surroundings, or you and other people, or animals, or whatever, you know? So I'm looking to figure out like different sort of communication methods. For me, I started with fashion design when I was 14 years old. Fashion has always been a very expressive thing. But the current fashion that we're wearing is analog. It's not doing anything, right? So what happens if our garments and fabrics are becoming more intelligent and they can create a dialogue with the world around us, right? And that's something that I'm interested in. So for the last 15 to 20 years, I've been basically working on a field called wearable robotics, putting and placing robotics on the body. I've been working with intelligent and smart textiles, so fabrics that become smart because of sensors, because of light, and all of that stuff. And for me, it's really where fashion becomes an interface, a new kind of interface between us and the world around us.
That is so amazing. And we talk about the Internet of Things, how our house can communicate, all the appliances can communicate with a central computer maybe into us, and everything's getting smarter. But you're taking something like clothing that we don't normally think about very much, and you're saying, it served a function. It serves a function of protecting us, keeping us warm from the environment, making us look good. And you've taken the fashion designer in you, and you're a great artist. So you have these beautiful models and these beautiful designs. So you're definitely accentuating the beautiful. But you're from Holland, and Holland is known for just an unbelievable. We'll do a little game later on about what came from Holland, because the list is unbelievable. But the Dutch are very known for great design, especially lately in the 1990s with the Digital School and this whole idea of a kind of a minimalist design that is innovative and has humor. And would you say you're kind of from that new tradition of Dutch design?
I do think so. Yeah, things need to work well, but they should also have a certain kind of humor injected in it. So that's really interesting that you name that, because in the end, the things that we have around us should also be a little bit fun, right? So I do agree with that.
Yeah, and it is fun. And we'll talk about some of your specific designs in a minute, but and some of it is exotic and dangerous and sexy, obviously with some of the Spider Woman stuff and the robotic claws, or whatever you call it, talons that come out. But then you did something that was so heartwarming with the unicorns, taking a very sensitive subject about children with ADHD and saying, why don't we just, instead of treating them like they're sick or there's something else, why don't we turn them into unicorns, which is freaking awesome. And it plugs right into who they are. And you have these little, I think it's right behind you, the little helmets. You made beautiful little helmets that that basically have, you want to talk about, let's talk about the unicorn, because I think it dives right into what you're more currently about now, is the biometrics and listening to people and listening to more than just their words, but maybe their biometrics.
Yeah, Asian Unicorn was a project that I did in collaboration with Ars Electronica, which is a big center in Linz in Austria. And you can see the Asian Unicorn there on one of my desks, kind of things, hanging on the wall. So yeah, for me that was important to not, And partially that was Ars Electronica pushing me into not making like another dress, but what else can I do and during that residency? So I said like, well, I would love to work with children, and yeah, the specific topic of ADHD and at that time also autism or children on the spectrum. So I started to look into that, and normally children are being measured in, I always say, a white room with a doctor with the 64 electrodes on the head. And for them, that's not a super comfortable experience, right? And then for me, as sort of the data researcher, because I want to see what is going on in their brain, it's not very practical because the child is scared or the child is uncomfortable, right? So that is sometimes a little bit wrong in yeah, working with children in medical settings in hospitals, because there's no fun aspect, what you named before, right? In the Dutch, we want to combine the fun with the design. So how can you make it a little bit more a comfortable experience, but also a more fun experience, right? One is that they're able to, with a unicorn, that they can put it on and put it off themselves. They don't need, you know, all the stuff. That was one of the ideas from the concept. The second thing is it's literally a unicorn, so they feel magical, right? I had all these horns in different colors, so they were really fun. And yeah, by that making it like, yeah, a more fun experience while you have a medical setting was really important for that project. And I think that is what a lot of people really appreciated, because design was never in a BCI like that sort of, you know, and especially not a very witty, like unicorn horn kind of design. So I think that inspired just a lot of, yeah, people, or like I got a lot of like good feedback from that project. And for me, it's important because I think that we as adults and we as humans, we give children medication way too early, especially with ADHD. And instead of maybe with the pharmaceutical industry, giving and depriving the child from their feelings and their emotions, especially when they grow up, is really important. Making them or figuring out a way on making them understand how their brain works. And that is basically the core of Aging Unicorn, you know, not depriving with medication, but yeah, making a playful device that might help them in a new or in a different way, sort of, you know. So for me, that's a project that is very much just to my heart, because yeah, I always think of like new generations growing up and the world that I grew up in, right, and the design that they have around them. So
yeah, and it seems democratic, because now with the virus, data has become a very big conversation, right?
yeah.
And there's data and there's data, and we're and not that America or the world is very literate in data comprehension, but there's like oceans of data, right? And where's the data coming from, and what's its pedigree and whatever. But this way, I see something really interesting happening where, you know, I have one of these watches on to tell me like what my heart rate is and how lazy I'm being, how many calories I'm burning. It's giving me, you know, metrics. But you're offering this idea that not only can we get the information from the child's brain and their heart, and maybe their insulin levels and all these different things, but maybe the child, at least maybe a little bit older child, I don't know how old, but maybe they can have access to that too. And they kind of own that and say, this is my data. And I was feeling that way because the teacher was too close to me, or that kid was bullying me outside and I was really stressed out. Like I know exactly what was happening that time of the day. So the kid could kind of own a kind of 360-degree view of their world that they didn't have before. It's kind of, it almost seems evolutionary that you're giving kids more sensory information of themselves, that you could see the downside of it, I suppose, but I see an upside here. What do you think?
Well, I think the problem with wearables currently is that we have an input, and then the input is interesting because it's your biometric data, right? But the output is not interesting because it's a screen. There's nothing fun happening there. Like the Aging Unicorn, it has a camera. It records whenever their focus, and I should have said that before, whenever their focus hits a certain threshold, they have focus. The camera goes on and it records everything that is happening around them. Like in the ideal case study, it was like you go to a zoo, and in the end of the day, you can see all the animals, or the ice cream and the friends and the bright color that got triggered, right? So like I like to think of like, what else can that screen be, right? The screen has, of course, a lot of potential. It can, like any screen can give us such a broad amount of data, you know. But what if, yeah, your attention is triggered and something lights up or something starts to move with you, you know? So I like to think of, yeah, sort of more the expressive fact, which wearables not necessarily have currently. or never really had. And I think that's really interlinked with like the fashion aspect, right? And all of the stuff that me and my colleagues and friends and people around me are doing. Sort of, we think a little bit further than just a screen. So what can a screen be? That can become a dress, that can become a facade in a building, or something, an artwork in an open or in a public space, right? And I think those things are just really interesting to me, because that is really where fashion and art and technology and architecture and all of that stuff meets, sort of.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because I think what you are is you're really a kind of shining example of someone who doesn't come from a culture of specialization. You didn't just go to art school and learn how to sculpt or paint, and then you're like, you didn't learn Adobe skills and anything else, and you just come out and you're like, what am I supposed to do now, right? You're a creature of I think a more integrated, open-minded, kind of out of the box. That's a cliche, I'm sorry, but what I'm trying to get at is it's a synthetic point of view that a cultural contributor, why shouldn't they have artistic skills and technical chops? And it seems like you you're probably not, a licensed engineer or electrician, but you probably do know a lot. So how did that happen? How does that work, where you could go from making your beautiful drawings, right, into some kind of a computer design, so it could be printed, and then integrate electronics and know what you're doing and know about, kinematics and levers and different kinds of linkages. How does a Anook happen?
I think I get like a lot inspired from like friends that are in maybe mechanical engineering or interaction design. I studied myself fashion design first, then I did art school. I did interaction design, so that's part where I learned my skills with electronics and coding. Fashion study, I learned how to construct garments. I did a side way of architecture, so I know a lot of architectural styles through the years. When I grew up, I think I didn't really have a social life. Other people went to parties, and I like to read into architecture or brain signals, right, and all of that stuff. So I think it's just a really big fascination on who we are and how the world works and all, and that's why my interest in science and all of that stuff. So I think it's it's just really what your passion is, is that for me it's really exploring the world from a very more intellectual side, I guess. And that inspires a lot of my projects, when I start with brain signals, I might not know anything about brain signals. I'm definitely not a neuroscientist, right? But I feel inspired by the field. And then as I do the project, I go deeper into it. So my first project was when I was working at Intel, it's called Synapse Stress. And that was the first time I worked with brain signals, was in 2013. So almost, 8 years further, I know now, of course, much more from brain signals than I did before, not from the neuroscience background necessarily, but from just my own interest in those little niche kind of things that I can find. I might not know everything about mechanical engineering, but I do know a lot about like robotics. And then, for example, I do a project now. Currently, I do a lot with gear-based mechanisms because I recently did a show called BattleBots, and I got really inspired by the robotics. So I really deep dive into stuff. I want to know everything about it. I want to see it. I want to like just work with it. And then basically, I start to make my own how I think. I conform, I observe, and then how I think a mechanism would work out. I start to work on that. So so it's really my biggest fascination for all these fields, from robotics to architecture to design to interaction design, coding. I think by that I really make a sort of a hybrid of all the knowledge that I have, because I pick and choose what I really want to learn, and what I in the end also use, right? So it's a little bit like reading a book, I guess. Like you cannot understand the full book, but mostly you can read into 5 to 10% or something, So what is that 5% or 10% that I'm interested in? And that is how I approach if I want to learn about brain signals, or if I want to learn about constructional or structural integrity in architecture, right? I might want to go to the time of the Gothic, where they make the bows. They could create the windows by which the lights could come in, so that's a really specific bow or construction method that I'm really interested in, other than maybe another architectural style, and that really helps me, like deep diving into a certain fragment of a certain discipline almost, and from that on you can go out, you can go learn more things, like how does the brain work, how are the synapses being triggered and all of that stuff, you deep dive into that, and almost naturally, because the passion is there and it's just something that you want to learn, sort of,
Yeah. I know everyone has the sport of, not that they're specialists, but they have the sport of critiquing education. I mean, everyone does it because, right? And I'm sure you do too. And so you came from Holland, which is famous for their education system, and it feeds into these art movements. And there's no coincidence probably that the kids have a certain background and they could go into these art schools. You've lived in America now for a little bit and you've traveled. What would you say, and we're talking in America now about STEM and STEAM, putting the A in STEM, and you seem to be Miss STEAM, Miss Universe of STEAM, it seems like. What would you think is some ingredients we might be overlooking or missing in how we're thinking about teaching our kids in the best environment? If you have an idea of the best environment for children in school, what do you think that would be?
I think STEAM and STEM education is really important. It's really great that it's finally here, a little bit late, like just in the world in general, not in America, right? But it inspires children, and it doesn't inspire boys or girls. It inspires just the whole global scale of like, hey, you can play around with robotics and it's really fun, right? So it's just really important that they get soaked into all these possibilities. Maybe in the end they want to make dresses, right? But the potential and the option is there that they can learn about electronics and coding. And as our society gets more digitally and weaved, right, and all of that stuff, it's a skill that is really necessary, for example, like technology and all of this stuff. So it's really, really important, and this is why I always have supported the maker scene, the maker spaces, the STEM education. I always give free lectures to whenever I travel around. I try to find a maker space to give a lecture at, just to inspire, just to show another side of creativity combined with electronics and all of that stuff, what people might want to pursue. For me, it's really important because I do a lot with kids and electronics, teaching kids about electronics other than their screens, because they don't often see bare electronics, they don't often see wires and soldering. So sometimes I do like little workshops with kiddie ears, they can solder them up, or like little projects that I can do at maybe maker fairs and all of that stuff. Also, the other thing is like really important for me is getting more girls into technology, and I think automatically I already do that a little bit by the fashion link, and whether maybe a girl doesn't want, I would build a robot right now, right? But not every girl might want to do that. They can see themselves making a robotic dress, right? And I think that is just really important because girls can be very visual, and they just like these more cutesy things and dresses, and especially if you can wear it right, like then that's boom, and I think that is really important for me, that I can be there for like sort of a next generation of girls, sometimes also growing up like, hey, use these sensors, or and that's just really fun because it's fun to work with kids. But I think STEAM and STEM education is important. Sometimes what I'm afraid of is that that they're missing out on the real life experience. Engineering can be boring, engineering can be dragging, right? Or coding can be boring. Sometimes, what is that real life experience that people can actually see them, sitting at the desk, being a developer, or working at a workshop, working with CNC mills and whatsoever. So that is something that I think is missing right now, but I hope that will come, so that you can actually really see where this goes, what is the real life practice in the end, sort of, because maybe we make STEAM and STEM too much fun, which I'm all for, but what are real life examples and how can they see themselves work in workshops, right? But I think that is really why certain programs on the TV of workshop kind of related things are important and inspiring, and you have all your superheroes like Adam Savage and all of that stuff, so I think that is kind of there, but that's the only thing that I would say that is a little bit missing, the practice of that stuff. But
so did you mentioned Adam Savage? So well, I think that's a good segue, because I was going to ask you about that. Should a school look less like an office and more like Adam Savage's workshop.
Yes.
Right? Right?
Exactly, yeah.
Because
it's always a desk. STEAM and STEM education is always a desk, whether makerspace is really a workshop. So you can really go in and get your hands dirty sometimes, right?
yeah.
So that's definitely what and that's also really fun because workshops are so much fun, you know, just getting your hands dirty and all of that stuff.
And you have
Yeah.
your everyone's usually in agreement on what they're building, right?
Mhm.
They want to make a boat float or airplane fly, drone fly, whatever it is. And so then they're confronted with the physics and the coding and all the different problems. And then they're confronted with the academics. So the academics comes almost last, but it's super relevant. And no one's going to say, you know, why do we care about the force of this propeller? Like, duh, it's got to push, right? So, you know what I mean? It's not so abstracted and academic that it becomes a boring just worksheet they have to learn or something on their tablet they have to study. So I'm with you 100%. I'm a very big critic of education because I sell to educators in my business, and it seems like they're always asking the wrong questions because it's always about, well, how could I put this on? How will this relate to how my kids do on the test?
Yeah.
And there's no test in the workshop. There's no test. It's like, does it fly or doesn't it fly? Why didn't it fly? Let's talk about that. Right. It's all.
I think education is all about finding your passion and then like specializing into that passion, right? And that's something that we sometimes, I guess, forget because you want to, just put so much information sometimes in the child's brain, right? But where is the child automatically going, sort of, you know? And I think by very playful practices like STEAM and STEM education, you already do that a little bit. Like, okay, I tried robotics, not for me. I can code. If whatever, I can always fall back on coding or whatever, you know. But it's there, sort of, you know. You let them taste, but then you want to also push them into whatever their passion is naturally, right?
So, what is the biggest skill? If you had to be the person to come down with the bad news to the schools and say they have to do this, what is the most important thing you want all the kids coming out of a Dutch school or American school to be good at? What would that be? What would that be if you had to make it universal and, you know, homogenous?
Ooh, that's a good question. Coding languages, definitely. Maybe not mechanics and robotics because not everybody uses that, right? It's just more fun to explore. And if that's something for you, yes. But I think coding is really important from Arduino. Arduino is an open source platform. You can buy an Arduino. You can start to code with your kids right now today, right? To using Python. Then there's a lot of like little things like you can teach your child with drag and drop, like programming kind of style. So there's a lot of ways, and maybe the robotic is the thing that you program, right? Or you make a little smart system for your home, or like whatever you do with it, sort of. But I think, the base of like learning any kind of coding language or understanding how it works, I guess, is just like really important for everything in this world, for the generations that are growing up, sort of.
So did that really affect? But let's talk about you. You wanted to design fashion first, right? For 14 years old, you said you wanted to design fashion?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Okay. For the expressive elements.
So how did you learn how to teach yourself? Is that, do you give credit to the schools for that, or just you're an autodidact by nature?
I was in a fashion school. I got basically kicked out of my fashion school because at the time that I started to learn to code, I needed some time to get a grasp of that. And that's not making dresses at that point. That is like really hardcore stuff, you know, to get into a new language. You know, it's like learning Japanese or any other language that's not super close to you, maybe. So actually I was very much busy with electronics. I had electronics on my desk instead of fabrics, and my school asked me to leave because they were like, maybe you should pursue like a technical thing, because at that time when I grew up, it was this or that, and it was not super out of the box thinking, sort of, you know. So I was following interaction design study from a friend of mine in the evenings to stay on my fashion school, to do fashion during the day. And in the evening, I would go to my friend's school in order to learn electronics. And I was a sort of had two lives almost, you know, because at that time it was not merging. That was the beginning of 2000s. And this is why I'm very much into interdisciplinary education, because for me, that was not existing. And that's something that I always would really push, because, I had to follow two studies, which is fine. But it was a little bit stressy, right? Especially because they could not talk to each other in a way. So yeah, and then the other thing is I come from the Netherlands. I think we have Philips. That was a big inspiration for anything technological, right? I think a lot of interesting technological innovations came from that. And specifically the place that I grew up is called Beemster. And it's a place around 9,000 people. And it is the first place that they created land, reclaimed from the water. So there was water before. It was the first place that they created land. And I grew up with windmills all around me. So that is basically, I think, if I look in retrospective, sort of the mechanic, they were the mechanic queens that we had around us, really forcefully pumping the water out of out of the land that I was living in, sort of, So I think I always felt inspired by mechanics from young on, and especially by the windmills and just the way that works, sort of, with all the gears and just what it did to our country. And yeah, we would be under the water if we wouldn't have them, sort of, So I think I have a lot of I had a lot of interest for mechanics and sort of technology because of that, sort of.
It is part of your culture. And I have friends who wanted me to ask all these questions, but I did do a little research because I knew a little bit about Holland, but oh my gosh. So I'm trained as a painter, and some of my favorite artists are, Mondrian, Vermeer, Escher, Van Gogh, Rembrandt, Peter Bruegel, Hieronymus Bosch, Jean Steele, William de Kooning. Oh my God, it's unbelievable, and they're all great. And of course, the land of tulips. And you just mentioned windmills and the great land irrigation situation of getting the water out. But so the land of canals, wooden shoes, Delft blue earthenware, innovative water management, like you said, millions of bicycles. Anne Frank. You guys invented the telescope, the microscope, the cassette, the CD, the DVD, the Blu-ray, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, electric razor, the Olympic flame, the submarine, the speed camera for the police. Thank you. And you invented the national anthem and four-wheel drive. So it's just amazing how much came out of a very small country. What's the population of Holland and the Netherlands? What's the population?
17 million. So if you think of Manhattan, I think it's the same or something like that. Or sort of,
Let's brag on that a little bit, because that's a pretty amazing. And of course, Holland was like Great Britain was a great naval power, a merchant power. And so you guys were traveling all over the world in the great sailing ships, bringing back and shipping out beautiful things. So you've been an international country for a very long time, as long as there's been international countries in Europe. And so it's just it's an amazing place. And so I think as Americans, Americans are addicted to the new and the fashionable. But I think that it would be wise if we all also let our gaze settle on countries that have been very successful and try to understand why they're successful, and if it's a preoccupation with solving problems like getting the water out of here, right? And that's interesting to me, because it goes to a national character, and it explains a lot of why so many good things and ideas are coming out of one small little place.
I think, I think we have, for example, in Germany, they have really the engineering minds. I think the Netherlands has a little bit of inspiration by all the countries, of course, that we have around us, but also we're very provocative, hey, this is not existing, let's do it, and not doing it over 2 years, let's do it this week or now, right? I'm going to work right now. So I think it's about having the energy for that sort of, but also really, creating sometimes pretty much out there kind of concepts, right, that later get adapted but I think the Netherlands is a really small country, but very provocative in a way.
Yeah, and I can see that by is Audi a Dutch company?
Audi not, no. Audi is German.
But so the Germans at least appreciate something from Holland, because they picked you to design some fashion for the release of one of their cars, right?
Correct. Yeah.
And those were beautiful designs. You want to talk about that, because some of your work is very commercial. I used to work in commercial art, and I know that people don't really realize this, but advertisers and companies really are desperate to try to get people's attention, obviously. And so sometimes they're the first early adopters of really good new ideas, especially ones that look really good and new, right? And you definitely exceed in making the future look very beautiful and exotic. So you want to talk about what Audi and how you guys related to each other?
Yeah, Audi. Yeah, overall, I work a lot with brands and with companies. Sort of, I always say like a company like Intel might not be interested to sell or showcase a red dress. Why? But if there's a dress with their technology in there, it's like that's a no-brainer almost, And I guess that is how I merge. Well, the other thing is I work pretty on short timelines.
Mhm.
So people know that most of my products are 2 or 3 months, which is
Wow.
critical, but it's thanks to rapid prototyping
Mhm.
and all the machines and tools that we have around us, of course, right? So there's a lot of people that sometimes reach out to me in order to do projects. And one was Audi in 2015. They had a new car coming out, the Audi A4, and they asked me, hey Anouk, do you want to create a collection based on that? And what do you want to do? So I was like, okay, I want to rip out your parking sensors and I want to rip out your headlights. They had these really cool lights,
Mhm.
these super high power like LEDs and all of that stuff, and
Mhm.
put that basically into the dresses and sort of start to work from that. So there became a really nice basically collection in where you really see my identity as a designer, but you also really see the DNA of Audi reflected in that. So it's one of the collaboration that I'm very proud of. Really because of that reason, because you can do something that is really statementally yours, but then the company would be like, meh, or you can do something that is really theirs. Then I would not until this day be talking about that, right? So it's all about finding that balance almost in design and interaction, in storytelling, and whatever that piece is doing, sort of.
Right. Did you incorporate your logo into the design too?
I did not, no, but it could fit pretty easily. Yeah.
I thought you did. Okay. And what did you do with Intel?
Intel, I was working as a blue badge between 2013 and 16, I think, or 15 or something like that. I was working in Portland, and they had the Intel Edison, which is a small sort of computer board based on that they introduced to be based on like wearables and products and all of that stuff. So I was working on that team, the new devices group, and I created a bunch of products. I think like 8 or 9 products in total. The unicorn also had a RealSense camera in there in the beginning, so I've always been using Intel technology. So one of the things was the RealSense, one was the Intel Curie, and the other one was the Intel Edison. One of the big dresses that I created for that was the spider dress, which is a dress based on proximity sensors. It has little servo motors in the shoulders, and when you step in the personal space of the design, it's like literally attacking, sort of, So the whole dress is 3D printed, and it's very sensoric. It measures the intimate, the personal, the social, and the public space all around us, and it reacts to that, and it reacts on something or through something that I call 12 states of behavior. So not just like you interact with the dress and it reacts and it attacks, but it really chooses based on your interaction with the dress, how you walk into the dress, how far you're away, the speed that you're going into the system, sort of. It picks one of those 12 states. So that goes from more like dancing, more organic sort of, to really very aggressive. So if you walk up very fast, very close by, you get a really aggressive movement out of there. So basically those are the 12 states that I programmed. There's a Jugendstil, so the legs go out and down. They're a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, sort of. So that is all about making the system choose, and then also making the system work on your behalf, right? Because we all know, the notion of personal space, culturally, there's a lot of cultural differences in that. And it's basically a sort of a mechanism that is almost defending you, right? So that makes it really interesting, because you might not want to say, hey, you're stepping currently too close in my personal space. But if you have a system, or you're wearing a system on your body that can do that communication for you, then it's kind of a polite thing, because it's like, hey, I'm not indicating this, but my system is indicating that currently you're coming too close. So it's it's a lot of like concepts, I think, in that dress, but it's mainly based on personal space and the theory of proxemics, which is created by Edward T. Hall in the 60s, I think. So
right. So you're on your work seems to be on the edge of a bunch of different cultural phenomenons. Obviously it's concept art. It could be like in MoMA. It could be a high art exhibit, right? Because it's very it doesn't seem really practical. It seems like more art, like an environment art or something, right? It's very artistic, but at the same time, it does seem like it's skirting an idea of maybe going into a practical thing. right? And it also, and you're talking about very intensively interesting things like psychometrics and interpreting body movement and people's intentions as they're coming towards you, which is really interesting. And at the same time, it dovetails into pure culture. Like I'm thinking Marvel or DC or Star Trek, where basically the Spider-Woman looks better than most of the characters in those universes. I mean, it's like you're almost anticipating a new level of science fiction or cyberpunk. And I was going to ask you, are any of those cultural influences affect you? Like I think of Geiger's art from Alien, the Swiss artist Geiger. Some of your torsos have a kind of organic, almost menacing kind of beauty to them. So is your inspiration purely biological and biomimetic, or are you looking to other cultural influences too when you design?
I look a lot at the body, at bones. H.R. Geiger, I met him in Vienna actually before he died. I'm a really big fan of just like the artwork, the shadows, just like the psychological thrill that you get looking at his work. You know, not all of them, but especially the bone, the structure base. You know, for me, everything goes back to structural integrity and structures, from creating the garments to creating like the architectural elements of the dress to looking at bones and, you know, vertebrae and all of that stuff. For me, it's just really interesting because those are the building blocks of our body, right? Of who really we are from a really primal sense, sort of, you know. So yeah, definitely his work inspires me a lot. Escher is another one that you like, MC Escher. Just for the weirdness, awkwardness, but also the interesting physics, like the experiments that are in there, sort of, you know. So I think there's a lot of like, yeah, a lot of artists that are like really interesting, from Nikola Tesla, from Tesla coils, from anything that he did with plasma and all of that stuff, and all the other inventions. So there's a lot of people from, yeah, design and architecture. Architecture, Zaha Hadid was one of the first females in architecture that really did beautiful things. Very organic, also really worked on structural integrities, making them round, taking that idea from, yeah, maybe the time of the Gothic, and leaning things that can lean on each other. And she could really build these very, or her in her studio could really build these very organic, really pretty kind of things, you know. Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of like, yeah, really beautiful yeah, creators that I definitely like riff on and really, yeah, engage in.
I was a big fan of the Italian artist, neoclassical artist, Pontormo, or maybe it's Baroque, but Pontormo. And the way he learned how to draw his very interesting, strange style, which was a mannerist style, was he drew bones. And not that he drew bones to make art with bones. He didn't put bones in his art, but he got the idea of the organic feel of things from drawing bones. Because they're like abstract art, aren't they? They're just beautiful. And so I was going to ask you, I don't think that you're literally copying bones. You're just being inspired from them. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, I'm inspired by bones. I'm inspired by science. I'm not literally, maybe sometimes you do literally in science experiment in a dress, but yeah, I think that's as the artist side of me, not the engineering or the whatever. I would think differently. You have a different hat on every time you're a different discipline, and you look at different things differently. But from the artist perspective, definitely like you're inspired by, and then you make your own derivative on that, right? So that's kind of the artistic part of it, because otherwise you would just be copying a thing. But yeah, it's more interesting when it has a relevance, right? Like the spider dress has the behavior of a cat. Like you cannot come close to a cat. It has the mechanics and the degree of freedom of a spider and a spider legs. And so I like to make hybrids of things. So it's almost like you're dreaming, like and all of these things can go together in a certain universe, you know, and that becomes the design. Then I think that's the most interesting thing, sort of, you know.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Hybrid seems to be one of your big themes in lots of different ways. And I was a failed aerospace engineering major. I did 2 years of aerospace, but I was drawing the whole time. I ended up being an art major, but I went right back into Buckminster Fuller and living in a hut in the woods and building domes out of sticks, because I had a kind of obsession about structure. I'm a structuralist too. But structure kind of marries art and science, doesn't it, in engineering?
Yeah, definitely, from so many sides. From that's something that I always get back to, sort of, you know, like the structure of things. yeah, like literally from the seams that we have in our garments, right, to how architecture can stand up and stay up, to yeah, that's just like really, really important, sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, I think artists point out to people what they deem provocative and interesting. We kind of put a focus. I'll put myself in your category. You're a better artist than me, but you try to showcase what you find beautiful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Essentially. Now, you might be owned by or claimed by different people. Like I would think transhumanists or cyberpunk types might want to claim you. What do you think about being claimed by different cultural movements as being or being claimed by them?
Interesting. Yeah, I guess I like to be more fluidic, like from, yeah, being like from being feministic to a certain kind of thing. I mean, I like to touch upon surface. I do agree with a lot of like, yeah, from transhumanism, all of that stuff. But for me, it's hard to really identify. I just want to be doing my thing and not being
Right.
really like eliminated or put in kind of a box, right? Because that would allow for you to go really one direction. It's as if it's like religion, right? If you sign up for something, I
Absolutely.
guess you need to go for that. And is there much allowance for other things? I just hate boxes. I want to break out of boxes so badly. So, and I think also from the education system, and it's really just needed, you know, our society has been growing the last 5 years very much like that, also because of STEAM and STEM and all of that stuff. But yeah, it's sometimes good to be just interested in like a group and all of that stuff. But yeah, definitely like and every field has like super interesting things that of course you connect with, right? But there's not really necessarily like one really big umbrella that I would say like I would be a part of, sort of.
Okay.
I'm a human, yes.
Good answer. It's a really good answer. I like it. But you are in the funnel now,
Mm-hmm.
and that funnel includes people like Elon Musk with the Neuralink. And I was talking to my wife, and I said, you know, I'm going to ask Anouk about her vision, a positive vision of the future, because everyone's doing the negative visions, right? But
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think that, and I'll tell you what I think is going on with your stuff, which is interesting, is that we're talking about, you know, the what do you call it when not the black hole, but when the AI comes online, becomes conscious. There's a word for that. I always forget that word, but when we're always afraid of the robot terror, like the robots taking over, but it seems like with cybernetic additions and adding technology to our body, we're kind of saying it seems like it's a movement also that I told my wife, I said, maybe we're going to be the first robots, not maybe the metaphor has to change. We're already technically kind of like robots anyways. We're mechanical beings with a consciousness. She's just adding new appendages, like evolutionary new appendages, like antenna, right? And extra brains, kind of like what Tesla is doing, or Elon Musk is doing with the Neuralink, just making us more, maybe not better, but more. What do you think about how you fit into that whole movement, and pitch it any way you want, or give us any kind of way of looking at it?
Yeah, I think like yeah, Elon has a lot of like things, ideas that are integrated in the body that there's no way of return really in a way, because what I love is exoskeleton. So if you want to be a human, you can be a human. You put your exoskeleton on or your spider dress or whatever, and you're a robot, right? Or you have this coexistence with a robotic system, and I think that's really interesting. Working with BCI, brain-computer interfaces, it's something that you can put on and put off as well, right? I've been playing around with measuring brain signals using 8 channels, 64 channels, one product with 1024 channels, which is a really high resolution, and that's what Neuralink is after, right? The interesting thing with Elon's stuff is he integrates it in sort of in your skull. What I need to deal with is the skin, the skull, the water, and then I get to the level that he's going, right? So integrating it into your skull is kind of quite interesting. The use case is only one hole, and you're like in the end you have a sort of a Swiss cheese kind of thing with all these holes in your head, and connecting to I think 3,700 channels or like plugs he had in the end, sort of, you know, which is incredible because the resolution has never been as great, right? But what does that do in the end to you as a human? You know, do you want to have always that interface in your head, or do you want to have something that you can put on and put off, maybe having a little bit less resolution, sort of, you know? So those things I'm always thinking about, and that's, I think, why I personally like the fashion aspect, because again, it's something that you can put on your body and put off as well. From Neuralink, I really love the resolution, the research, all the like incredible stuff that they do, of course, you know, from the scientist in me sort of says, that's amazing because the resolution has never been, great. Is it really fashionable or something that from day-to-day thing you can wear, sort of, possibly. But I mean, that's for the future to figure out, sort of, you know.
So when you were a kid, you might be too young for this. Did you ever have a mood ring?
Yes.
Well,
yeah, thank you.
As you know, some of your contemporaries, women in fashion, are using these new materials now that have digital interfaces where they could basically be wearing mood rings, right? Or show off temperature or different things. And there's even fabrics now they're talking about that could be that could give off a digital image. So you could have a Coca-Cola ad on your shirt, maybe get some monetary compensation for advertising Taco Bell. So what are your, have you looked at any of these new materials? I know you've made dresses that smoke and do different really quite crazy things. Have you looked at materials that actually give off digital images?
I used in 2009, I worked with a PDLC foil, which is a polymer dispersed liquid crystal, which could change in transparency. I think like material research is like really interesting, especially if it goes to that kind of level, sort of, you know. I'm always like really much about what it can do from like more robotic perspective as well, because just my fascination, sort of. But yeah, there's a lot of like really interesting fabrics. How does that connect to your emotions is always the question, because measuring our emotions is still, people think we're there, but it's still a hard thing to do, right? Like really like fight or flight is easy, right? Stressors and all of that stuff. But if you really go into the broad scala of emotions, or recognizing 12 emotions, that's still something that we're still figuring out, sort of, you know. So connecting that to things like emotions is always quite kind of an interesting thing. And also like, of course, the sensors need to be placed on different parts of the body. Like your brain signals need to be measured here. EMG might be here. So your muscle contraction, respiration would be your lung volume would be like here somewhere. Your heart rate, of course, we know where the heart is. So there's basically, if you really want to reliably like measure emotions, you almost have this, again, an exoskeleton of all these sensors on these different places, right? And then the other thing that people do sometimes wrong is that they just try to take or try to read emotions from one point. What I'm trying to do currently in a project is measuring it from looking at what the brain does. How does the heart respond to that? How are the muscles contracting to that? You know, so you look at basically all your body parts, not at the same time, but you link, okay, from the brain to the heart, and you try to figure out like ways that all these body parts are basically interacting with each other, sort of, you know. Which is quite interesting. But measuring emotions and then showcasing it, of course, that's what I'm after. So if there's materials that can do that, that's of course like super fascinating, especially with the materials as they get better. That opens up more potential to actually be having designs that you can actually sell and can buy right now in the store, right? There's still a few problems that we have, like maintaining the design, washability, and also power, you know. So there's still a lot of things that we try to figure out with the field, but as materials, textile and materials progress, that opens up much more possibilities to actually have designs that are body-based and measure the body or the surroundings and can be sellable. So that's definitely, super cool.
So right now you've been mostly our research and development, future vision stuff. You haven't made as far as I'm aware of, you haven't made a ready to wear, right?
I have not made ready to wear. During COVID, I have done a lot of product design, which is interesting and tedious at the same time. but I have not done that yet, and that's mostly because my clients are not asking me to make a sellable collection. They mostly ask me to make something in 2 months or 3 months, sort of, you know. And it's mostly a little bit like that. I start like a case study with that because I want to. I always have things on my list. When a client comes to me, I'm like, oh, what about this, you know, and then I can stripe it from my list, sort of. Right. So I've been operating more on sort of the R&D and innovation kind of thing and far out thinking than really making it pliable to really sell something. And mainly because we still have a lot of problems, like you don't want to sell things with lipo batteries. I have now everything on rechargeable batteries and all of that stuff, but the batteries are not yet there for me, sort of, you know, they're not organic, they're not created for the body, they're not necessarily flexible. Anything that we don't want the battery to be, that is the ideal battery for the body, right? Or how can we use kinetic energy, and also like washability, you know, if our washing machines are not ready for that yet, then why would I make a collection, right? Because water is the #1 enemy for electronics. And I know, for example, that washing machine brands are working actually on washing machines that have that are not using water, but those are things. Those machines are still stuck in their laboratories, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not necessarily out there for us to use. So I think the time is ready in a sense, and at the other sense, like not super. So I've been just focusing on other stuff that I have on my list, but maybe soon.
There's a movie coming out pretty soon called Dune.
Yeah.
And of course, Dune, if you've read it, you know about the Fremen's suit, the sin suit.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're a fan. And I don't know who designed it for this movie, but it always seems like they hire an interesting designer to make the new synth suit for the Fremen. But were you ever inspired when you read, if you read it or saw the movies, about the idea of a suit that basically has an ecosystem, that's a kind of an organism along with you? What do they call those organisms that are with you, like the lamprey on the shark? A symbiotic organism. Because it seems like your symbiosis is kind of one of your themes. Where so give me your thoughts about maybe is a Fremen synth suit or anything like it in our near future, you think?
It's in the end all about the symbiotic relationship that we have with technology, and where the current technologies are not listening to us, and that's mainly because they're not connected to our skin, our heartbeat, so they don't know how our stress level is, right? If I get bombarded on my telephone with messages, that's because my phone is not sensitive necessarily to my needs, right? It can do a lot of things, and that's why I'm interested in like these ideas around possible suits that can do all of that. In the end, it's really about like this symbiotic relationship between you and your system. Of course, you can use machine learning AI, which is really interesting because it can every day the system can learn more about you and maybe better help you, right? And that's kind of an interesting thing, or better express you. You know, one of my dresses is the pangolin dress. This is a new one, a shorter one that I'm working on, but it works on brain signals. And every day that the model is wearing it, she can control the dress better. She can go into a meditative state, a neutral or an hectic state in mind. And you can see the dress like reacting to that in more it's the movement of the dress and also the LEDs. And you can see if I work with a model for 3 days, the third day she can control the dress, whether the first day she cannot, because the dress is all over the place in colors, in movement, in lights and all of that stuff. The more we get adapted to these technologies, but really these technologies live on our bodies and live with us almost, you know, there's also the adaptability there, which I think is really just really interesting, sort of, you know. So yeah, definitely, suits, that's the one thing. I love dresses, but I'm here in Florida. I don't know if I want to wear a suit in Florida or in warmer countries or Dubai, right? That's why I'm really interested in just all of this and the potential, sort of.
Well, I wanted to ask you too about the idea. We'll go back to the unicorn for a second. The idea that if we can get real-time telemetry or data from a child's brain and emotional state, and even maybe what they're learning in class, right? And we were able to put these unicorn heads on maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions of children around the globe, right? Mm-hmm. And it seems like there'd be the data set would be, of course, astronomical, right? Yeah. But we might be able to, and with AI assistance, perhaps we can learn from this data set trends in better education, in better environments for children. Like maybe they shouldn't be in rectangular rows. Maybe ellipses really kill, right? Mm-hmm. Because all the trial and error, we say, schools, do what you're doing already. Don't change. We want to see maybe the ellipse classroom, or maybe a geodesic dome school is better than a rectilinear school, or a whatever, right? Whatever, or a hut. So it seems like going back to my original question about data, you're part of the physical end of the data mining movement, in a sense, where you're saying, let's get the data from people's bodies and put them to use, whether it's a mechanical exoskeleton or
Mhm.
a global understanding of the human brain and the human and humanity. What do you think about that?
Yes, I guess I'm part of the movement. I'm always also saying that what I see, what I always say is because, yeah, people always think because we can, we should do it. And a lot of people and a lot of companies, big companies, are data mining just for the sake of it. Hey, we can do that, not necessarily thinking the long term of like what's happening to that and if it's very relevant for your research. So I would always say, if you're mining stuff, be very specific and don't be super greedy just taking everything, because it ends up like you can be a hoarder, you can be a collector, right? And that is the thing that ends up with most of these companies. They have so much data sitting around that they don't use. So what's the practicality of that in the end, right? If you don't use it. So that is, but I'm then the other side, I'm used to work with a very limited space, right? The body in a space, maybe a space without internet, what happens to that? So I really need to be really specific to what kind of data I collect. And even sometimes with the Agent Unicorn, I had to go from 64 sensors to 8, right? To have a system that that would be a little bit more adaptive to the head and putting it on and putting it off, sort of, you know. So I'm always very selective with the sort of, yeah, the data that I'm collecting, sort of, you know. So that is one thing that I really see in the industry, that they just collect just for the heck of it, for the sake of it, you know. And I don't think that that's a very very fruitful thing in the end, sort of, you know. So yeah, I think like being pretty specific about the data that you gather, sort of, and also very much working on the privacy, right? And all of that stuff, especially if you are of course a lot of companies are busy with that, and I'm living and have lived in Silicon Valley for quite a while. But I do see a lot of like designers that work with data that might not be super specific on storing it anonymously. For example, you know, if I use facial recognition, I put like simple things, little things over the eyes, so that whatever I'm measuring is not being stored, like it's being stored anonymously. So there's like really simple tricks that you can do, even if you're doing research, or if you're prototyping something, you know, that you can already think of like making that data more anonymously when you store it, sort of, you know. Because a lot of prototypes, they are being created and the privacy issue is not a problem when they're testing, but then it goes to another, they hand it off, and you know, they have not been super specific about that, sort of. So always early on try to make it as anonymous as possible, basically, when you work with data.
My last question. Could you do me a favor and tell us what the future is going to look like in 20 years?
Ooh. Yeah.
And this could be
Definitely.
this could be your opinion, of course, you know, but what I want the artistic vision. What do you see? And it may be a world that's affected by you. So give yourself as much input on that future as possible in the vision you're going to tell me.
Yeah, I think, technology came into our lives to help us. It's currently overwhelming us. I think that in 20 years, we will be coming much closer to ourselves. I think like there's a big divide now between us and technology. If we go to Facebook, we tend to say the happy things and not the sad things. We don't say when we're sad, we say when we're happy. And that is something that social media created and the technologies around us. If you're going into really measuring the body, recognizing emotions, the emotions that, for example, if you wear a dress that really literally expresses your emotions, that's not only the happy emotions and the pretty emotions, that's also when you feel sad or lonely or depressed, right? So if these things like, that's the things that we're working on, you really need to be very like specific about your emotions. What does that do in a day-to-day life, right? With your friends, with your family, it's almost like a lie detector. If you're wearing a dress that really truly showcases your emotions, it's like blushing. You cannot withhold it. You know, if you're having a date with somebody and your dress starts to almost blush or say something, communicate something of you. So I think we will become like much more closer to our very primal feelings and emotions. And what would that and such technologies do on the work floor, right? And if we can be just honest about who we are. I think as children we're really honest, and then we get to learn that, oh, you should do this and you should do that and blah blah blah. So I think in 20 years our technologies will have made us more primal and more closer to our sort of authentic and primal and animalistic self, sort of, because of that.
That's an amazing answer. I could hear some people saying, wait, do I want my date to know how turned on I am by him? Like, do we?
Yeah, I'm from the Netherlands, so we're all like Netherlands and New Yorkers are pretty straightforward. We're like, yeah, that's it.
I mean, the idea of the persona, it means, doesn't persona mean the word mask? We're mask wearing creatures, right? And you're saying, well, I want to be able to dial that mask back and make it a variable, like a variable rheostat or something on the mask.
Currently, there's a lot of mental issues, mainly because people cannot be themselves, right? Or they feel trapped, or there's just a lot of lies. There's a lot of things. So things need to change. And I think, yeah, you can go one way. You can go to the Jetsons and everything is perfect and sci-fi looks cool. But I think we need to go, yeah, really much the other way. Like, yeah, the sort of like, yeah, intertwine us to be closer to nature, to be closer to our animalistic selves almost, you know. And I think technology is currently not doing that because it has a very artificial and subjective and a very superficial kind of relationship with us. Yeah, we will definitely start to deep dive more into the sort of the more where the primal and the technology meet, sort of.
I am so glad the world has you in it.
No.
I mean it. I mean it. I think that you're offering a kind of a vision that people I never imagined that we should get, that the technology will open up our emotions and reveal things about maybe our children or our spouse that they wouldn't reveal. That's not compromising, though. You're not saying it's not compromising. It's actually creating a better system of communication. And I think it's absolutely beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with me. So, and thank you for being a guest on my show. You were great. Where could people find out more about Anouk? I think you should do the Prince thing in America and just go by Anouk.
I know, right? Yeah, the last name is a little bit hard to pronounce either way, but yeah.
You know, like Celine, just be Celine, Anouk. Where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, they can go to my website. I need to update it, so don't go there actually. They can reach me on social media under my name, Anouk Wipprecht. Most of all, I like it when people have questions, you know, if they are like, hey, Anouk, I feel really inspired. Always wanted to work with sensors. What would you recommend? Or, hey, I want to measure this and this. Basically, like, very practical things that I can give very practical answers on. So if you are listening and you want to start with an Arduino or you want to send something very specific, feel free to drop me an email. You can find it on the email, the email form on my website, or you can reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook or something like that. So because most of all, I'm just happy to help and inspire working with electronics and technology and other people.
And you just got done with robotics competition. What's the next big thing on your horizon?
Yeah, I have a few like projects going on in sort of the entertainment atmosphere, which I cannot tell too much about. It's like a show in Las Vegas, which needs a system that needs to be maintained over many years. So that's kind of a really interesting engineering thing, sort of. And yeah, much more with body signals as well. So I will be coming out with a few more projects.
Cool. Well, good luck on your move to California. I hope you pick a good spot. It's a nice new state for you to go to.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Okay. Well, thank you. And we'll talk soon again. And I'll share this with you once I get it on YouTube. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.